Chapter 13 Sunhee. I knew something was wrong. All evening, Taeil's face was like a rock, cold and hard and gray. Later, I saw him and Uncle talking in the garden. I watched as Uncle shook his head and put his arm around Taeil's shoulder. I could tell that Uncle was trying to comfort him, but of course, nobody told me anything. In the morning, I left the house and walked along, waiting for the moment when Taeil would zoom by me on his bicycle, as he always did. I was nearly halfway to school when I finally turned around, wondering where he was. He usually passed me long before this point, and I saw him a few blocks behind me, walking. The bicycle could have been broken, but I knew at once this wasn't what had happened. I remembered his face from the night before. His bike had broken lots of times. He'd never looked as sad as he did now. And he went on looking like that for days afterward. No, not sad. That isn't quite right. Sad and angry mixed up together. Angry at 아버지 for some reason. Taeil seemed to stiffen whenever 아버지 came into the room. If 아버지 spoke to him, he answered with a grunt or mumbled something. I could hardly believe Taeil was being so disrespectful. Whenever they were in a room together, things were really uncomfortable, like a blanket of bad feeling over us all. As if this weren't enough, like at home seemed even grayer and sadder because Uncle wasn't around as much. He was working longer and longer hours at his shop. There were nights when he didn't come home at all. 어머니 worried about his health. She feared he wasn't eating or sleeping enough. Sometimes she sent me or Taeil with some supper for Uncle. More and more often when I reached the shop, I'd find the door closed. I'd call out as I pushed to open the door, and Uncle would come hurrying out of the back room. He always greeted me cheerfully and made a joke about how I'd saved his life by bringing food. And then he would walk me out and look up and down the street before he closed the door behind me. I was curious about the way he scanned the street. He'd done the same when I came by with Jeongjin. Time after time, I almost said something to Taeil, but he had to have seen it too, and he hadn't said anything. One evening in early summer, 어머니 sent me out with Uncle's supper. As I left our house, I saw a movement out of the corner of my eye that startled me. Someone was standing in the long shadow of the wall of the house next door. It was Tomo. "Tomo, what are you doing hiding there? You nearly frightened me to death." "Hello," he said, but he didn't step out of the shadow. He leaned forward a little and looked quickly up and down the lane. Then he jerked his head, beckoning me to join him. I was pleased to see him, but the way he was acting made me look around nervously as I walked toward him. We were at different schools now, so it had been a while since we'd last met. I noticed how much he had grown. We'd always been close to the same height, but now he was nearly a head taller than me. "I was just passing," he said carefully, "and I thought I'd stop by and see if you were around. I've been thinking about something." His eyes flickered to my face, then down to the ground. He was definitely uncomfortable. "Thinking about what?" I asked as gently as I could. Aimlessly, he kicked a stone at his feet. Then he squatted down on his haunches and picked it up. He examined it carefully for a moment, as if it might hold a secret. Suddenly, his face seemed to brighten. He stood up again and held a stone out to me. "Do you remember when we used to collect stones like this to build our cities?" I smiled. "Of course I remember. We built lots of cities, some really good ones. Remember the stadium?" "Yes, I've been thinking about those days," Tomo said, still speaking slowly. "About the little things your uncle made for us. Do you know what happened to them?" Uncle had often stopped by to admire the cities. Once he gave me a present, several tiny signs with real printing on them. He'd made them at his shop. They said things like grocery store and railway station. I was so proud when I brought them to show Tomo. They made our city look much more real. Another time, Uncle made a lot of little things out of wire. Lamp posts and gates for outside the houses, tables for inside, even a tiny wire bicycle. We were delighted. Now I frowned. What happened to what? The little signs or the wire things? I suppose they all got lost. I'm not sure, but I know I don't have them at home anymore. He said. I wish I knew. It's too bad. He made some really nice things. An odd feeling was growing inside me, in my throat, in my stomach, at the back of my neck. The way Tomo was looking at me, talking so seriously about a few silly childish toys. It was as if he were saying one thing while thinking another. He took a step toward the lane. I have to go now. I just wanted to say I always thought it was a shame that we didn't keep those things safe somehow. It was so nice of your uncle. I thought of it especially today. His voice trailed off. He glanced up and down the lane again, then looked at me one last time as if he were about to say something more. Instead, he handed me the stone, touched his cap, and hurried away. I stood still for a moment, saying one thing but thinking another. I sensed that Tomo had wanted to tell me something that he couldn't say openly. I looked at the stone he'd given me. The houses and shops were built out of stones like this one. The little things inside them that Uncle had made for us. Uncle. He'd mentioned Uncle a couple of times. A shame. Your uncle. Not safe. Especially today. I raised my head in a moment of stunned realization. Tomo had brought me a warning. Something bad was going to happen to Uncle. I dropped the lunchbox that held Uncle's dinner and began to run. The few blocks to Uncle's shop had never seemed so long. I couldn't go as fast as I wanted to. I had to keep an eye out for military guards who would surely question me if they saw me running in a panic. I stayed close to the buildings, hurrying along and pausing before I turned a corner. I thought perhaps I should go home first to talk to Teo, but my heart was pounding, my thoughts were pounding, and I couldn't seem to stop my feet. As I neared the center of town, where there were more guards, I slowed down and tried to walk casually, thinking the whole time. If I went home and told Teo, what would he do? He'd go warn Uncle, surely. He might even be angry at me for wasting time. I thought of it especially today, Tomo had said. Whatever it was, it might happen any minute now. The sooner, the better, to tell Uncle. This must be what Abaji had been afraid of, what he'd tried to warn Uncle about. Or else, Teo might say it was nothing, that we should wait and see. That I'd imagined everything, that Tomo had just been chatting about nothing. Teo might think I was silly for getting so excited, but he hadn't been there. He hadn't seen Tomo's uneasy face or heard the worry in his voice. I knew I was right. I knew Tomo. He was telling me more than he said. I could feel it. I quickened my steps again. Now I could see the shop. The door was closed. I ran the last half block and pushed the door open. There was no one in the shop itself, but I heard low voices coming from the back room. Uncle? I called shakily. Uncle came out with an unusual cheerful expression on his face, though I could see from the dark smudges under his eyes that he was very tired. Sonny, he said, where's my supper? Did you eat it on the way here? I was too frightened to respond to his little joke. Uncle, please, you must leave here quickly. Something bad. I don't know when. The light in Uncle's eyes faded at once. He came toward me and put his arm around me. Sonny, calm yourself. What's the matter? I took a deep breath, swallowed hard, and began again. Uncle, Tomo came to me just now. He said something bad is going to happen. To you. He didn't say exactly when or what it was, but he was very worried. I could tell, and it will be soon. Uncle, please, what is it? What was Tomo talking about? Uncle didn't look surprised. He didn't even question me. Wait here, he said, and went to the back room. He spoke to someone. I could hear another voice answer him, but couldn't make out the words. Then there was a sudden flurry of activity, the sound of papers being rustled. I heard the front door rattle from the drafts as the other person left by the back door. Uncle returned and came out from behind the counter. He pulled me close to him and gave me a quick hug. I am not going home tonight, Sonny. I won't be home again for a long time. How long? I'm not sure. I can't answer your questions right now. You must hurry home. He paused for a moment. Tell tale. I said, he can tell you what he knows. Something bad was about to happen. Uncle had been expecting it. Not from me. Maybe not in this way. But he was ready. He knew what was happening, even if I didn't. And he had a plan, somewhere to go. A tiny voice in my head said, You're right. Aren't you glad you didn't go to tail first? But it was silenced almost immediately by other voices, cries of fear for Uncle's safety. He reached out and gave my hair a gentle tug. Now go, and continue to be brave, Sonny. You have been very brave tonight. I am proud of you. And he walked me to the door. I stood in the street for a moment. The sun was sinking behind the hills that surrounded the town. Its last rays seemed to be a blur of gold. I blinked to clear my vision, and a tear rolled down my cheek. Hastily, I wiped it away and set off toward home. When I reached the lane, I caught sight of the lunchbox I dropped. It made me feel bad. Whatever Uncle was doing, wherever he was going, he surely would have liked a bite to eat. As I bent over to pick it up, I saw the stone Tomo had given me, and I picked that up too. I stepped into the corridor that led to our inner courtyard.